Pope Francis addressed world leaders including US President Joe Biden, who were meeting in southern Italy at the G7 Special Outreach Session dedicated to artificial intelligence June 14th.
Questa mia riflessione sugli effetti dell'intelligenza artificiale sul futuro dell'umanità ci conduce così alla considerazione dell'importanza della sana politica per guardare con speranza e fiducia al nostro avvenire. Come già detto altrove, la società mondiale ha gravi carenze strutturali che non si risolvono con rattoppi o soluzioni veloci meramente occasionali. Dobbiamo andare alle radici. Ci sono cose che devono essere cambiate con reimposizione di fondo e trasformazioni importanti. Solo una sana politica potrebbe averne la guida, coinvolgendo i più diversi settori e i più vari saperi. In tal modo un'economia integrata in un progetto politico, sociale, culturale e popolare che tenda al bene comune può aprire la strada a opportunità differenti che non implicano di fermare la creatività umana nell'intelligenza artificiale e il suo sogno di progresso, ma piuttosto di incanalare tale energia in un mondo nuovo. Questo è proprio il caso dell'intelligenza artificiale. Spetta a ognuno farne buon uso e aspetta alla politica creare le condizioni perché un tale buon uso sia possibile e fruttuoso. Grazie.
French far-right leader Marine Le Pen found plenty of supporters during a visit to a market on Friday, kicking off her campaign in her northern stronghold, as her National Rally Party negotiated with potential allies to form a team that could run the government should it win a snap election.
We are facing a great danger, which is the far left that is both radical and violent, and which, and I say this clearly, has violated individual and public freedoms and is composed of people whose ideas are not acceptable. That's the real issue of this election, which is taking place in such a short time. But that's offering great hope for tens of millions of French people.
The snap election was called by President Emmanuel Macron after his centrist alliance was trounced by Le Pen's National Rally, or RN, in Sunday's European Parliament ballot. The move has upended French politics, with parties rushing to field candidates and prepare platforms. Opinion polls project that RN could, for the first time, top the vote, but without enough seats to win an absolute majority and govern on its own. For the anti-immigration Eurosceptic RN, the challenge is to transform popularity into a win at home and to convince voters it can be trusted to govern after decades on the margins. Le Pen said RN will focus on giving back a strong purchasing power to the French, as well as limiting the number of immigrants entering France. Jordan Bardella, dubbed Le Pen's protégé, began his campaign with a visit to a farm on Friday and said he wants to see immigrants who commit crimes expelled from the Republic.
Now, please allow me to remind you that there are millions of French people in our country who, like me, have an immigrant background, who respect our laws, who work, who pay their taxes, who feel fully French, and who don't understand that many of those who arrive today seem exempt from making this effort.
RN is up against Popular Front, an alliance of left-wing parties including the centre-left Socialist Party, the Greens, the hard-left France Unbowed, and the Communist Party of France. On Friday they said they wanted to lower the retirement age, link salaries to inflation, and introduce a wealth tax for the rich. Opinion polls show that the leftist alliance is unlikely to win the vote, to be held in 2 rounds on June 30th and July 7th. The polls suggest the left's chances of winning the election are slim, but their tie-up could bundle enough votes to hinder both Macron's and Le Pen's camps from reaching a stable governing majority, handing it sizable political leeway.
It is a partnership that was once unthinkable. But on Friday, the African National Congress and its largest rival, the Democratic Alliance, agreed to work together in South Africa's new government of national unity. This is a momentous political shift after 30 years of ANC majority rule. It brings together the one-time liberation movement of Nelson Mandela and a pro-business party that has struggled to shake its image as a defender of white privilege.
The DA has reached agreement.
DA leader John Steenhuisen said the deal made South Africa a better country than it was yesterday. 2 weeks of intensive behind-the-scenes talks have led to this outcome. That's after voters punished the ANC for a checkered record, including high unemployment, a stagnant economy, and rolling power blackouts. Talks came down to the wire, with the new parliament convening on Friday for the first time since the May 29th election. The new government will also feature two smaller parties, the socially conservative Inkatha Freedom Party and the right-wing Patriotic Alliance. Among those not included in government are the radical left Economic Freedom Fighters and the new MK party led by former President Jacob Zuma. A partnership with those parties would have been preferred by some ANC supporters, in a country still processing the legacy of the racist colonial and apartheid regimes. However, investors had been hoping for an agreement with the DA because of its free market policies.
From a slew of central bank meetings to the Euro Cup descending upon Germany, these are the stories to watch in business and finance in the coming week. Britain, Switzerland, and Norway hold central bank meetings on Thursday. The Bank of England will likely dash any hopes the ruling Conservative Party had of a pre-July 4th election rate cut. Markets now expect easing later rather than sooner. There is a 50-50 chance the Swiss National Bank will cut again. Norway, on the other hand, is in no rush. U.S. monthly retail sales numbers are out Tuesday. They're expected to have risen 0.3% in May, according to a Reuters poll, after they were unexpectedly flat in April. Investors will be watching consumer spending to gauge the impact of higher interest rates on the economy, now that rate cuts aren't expected before September. Data on China's home prices is due on Monday. It's the first such release since Beijing announced the, quote, historic steps to stabilize the property market, though to limited effect so far. May industrial output, urban unemployment rate, and retail sales data are due too. Fans have descended upon Munich for the European Football Championship. German beer halls and companies hope fans will drink more and buy big TVs. Berlin wants the tournament to give its lumbering economy the same kind of lift the sizzling 2006 World Cup did.
Germany says it wants serious movement from China in a row over electric vehicle tariffs. Berlin also said Friday it hopes talks in the coming weeks can hold off an escalating trade conflict. Chancellor Olaf Scholz's government is pushing for what it calls an amicable solution. That after the EU threatened to impose anti-subsidy tariffs to shield European automakers from competition. Germany is Europe's largest economy and carries major weight in the bloc. Its leading car manufacturers have fiercely opposed the EU tariffs and fear retaliation could harm their business in the vast Chinese market. Economy Minister Robert Habeck travels to China next week. His ministry said Habeck will not be involved in the tariff negotiations directly. But they said he will push for fairer trade conditions during meetings with Chinese officials. Bloomberg News on Friday reported Germany wants to prevent the car tariffs from coming into force or at least soften them. German officials have not confirmed this.
Princess Kate says she's making good progress with her cancer treatment, but warns she's, quote, not out of the woods. This photo of her was released on Friday at the same time as a personal note, where she says she's been, quote, blown away by kind messages from around the globe, and that they've made a big difference to her and her husband, Prince William, the heir to the throne. In the message, she says, there are good days and bad days. I'm learning how to be patient, especially with uncertainty. Kate also said she would make her first public appearance in months on Saturday at the King's birthday parade. The 42-year-old is set to ride in a carriage with her 3 children, Princes George and Louis and Princess Charlotte. and also appear on the balcony of Buckingham Palace with senior royals, including King Charles. Kate's last public appearance was in December, when she attended a Christmas Day church service. People in London welcomed the news.
Obviously, she's a mum, and the most important thing is that she can be there for her children. So great that she's feeling well enough that she can even come out to the public eye.
Hopefully it gives other people in similar situation with the cancer diagnosis hope.
In January, Kate spent 2 weeks in hospital after having major abdominal surgery. She revealed the tests found cancer in March. Her office, Kensington Palace, has declined to give details about the type of cancer she has or her treatment, other than to say she began preventative chemotherapy in February. Aides have warned Saturday does not mark Kate's return to a full work schedule. She says her treatment will continue for a few more months.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is meeting world leaders for a summit this weekend. He hopes to explore ways to end his country's war with Russia, the deadliest conflict in Europe since World War II. Who is attending, and what will be the likely outcome of the talks? Zelensky will use the event in the Swiss mountaintop resort of Bergenstock to build support for Ukraine's fight against Russia's invasion in 3 key areas: food security, nuclear safety, and the release of all prisoners and deportees. On the battlefield, the gathering comes at a difficult time for Ukraine. Russian troops, who now control around 18% of Ukrainian territory, are advancing in the east. With that and the entrenched differences between Russia and Ukraine, the summit will likely shy away from territorial issues. Instead, focusing on parts of Zelensky's plan that are broad enough to be palatable to most, if not all, participants.
Ending of this war.
Orysia Lutsevich, a Chatham House expert on both Ukraine and Russia.
I think we have to understand that this summit is not a place and was not originally envisaged as a platform for negotiated settlement of this war. Russia is not willing to negotiate at this point. It feels it has an upper hand on the battlefield. So it was an endeavor by Kyiv to actually unite the world in support for its war-ending strategy, to present it as a global issue and to count friends.
Around 90 states and organisations have confirmed their participation at the talks organised by Bern at Ukraine's behest. US Vice President Kamala Harris, French President Emmanuel Macron, and the leaders of Germany, Italy, Britain, Canada and Japan are among those set to attend the June 15th to 16th meeting. Russia isn't invited. Kyiv had hoped to take steps towards isolating Russia by winning over countries that have friendlier ties with Moscow. India, which has helped Moscow survive the shock of economic sanctions, is expected to send a delegation. And Turkey and Hungary, who maintain cordial ties with Moscow, will be represented. But the main thorn in Kyiv's side is China, a close ally of Russia's. Beijing said it would not attend the summit, describing the attendance of both warring sides as a prerequisite for any substantive peace conference. The question many will be asking is whether the Swiss summit will offer any tangible progress towards ending the war in Ukraine. Switzerland wants the talks to pave the way for a, quote, future peace process in which Russia takes part. Ukraine has said Moscow could be invited to a future summit on Kyiv's terms. Zelensky has acknowledged the challenge of maintaining international support as the war, now well into its 3rd year, grinds on. One political scientist told Reuters that while Russian President Vladimir Putin is still in power, it will be difficult to reach a peaceful solution. Russia has described the idea of a summit to which it is not invited as futile. Moscow frames its special military operation in Ukraine as part of a broader struggle with the West, which it says wants to bring Russia to its knees. Kyiv and the West say this is nonsense, accusing Russia of waging an illegal war of conquest. Although Switzerland says Russia must be a part of the peace process, it said Moscow was not invited because it had no interest in attending. Bern says the talks should define a roadmap on how to involve Russia and Ukraine in the future.
From a trench near the front line in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region, this 55-year-old soldier, who goes by the call sign Dad, is conducting battleground training.
Sanya!
Ukrainian forces, now 27 months into a war with Russia, have become heavily reliant on older soldiers like Dad to defend the country. But they need reinforcements. 33rd Mechanized Brigade Chief Sergeant, call sign Deputy, is 44 years old.
In reality, the average age of our brigade soldiers is quite high. There are a lot of people over 50, but their motivation is much higher than of the young troops. They understand why they're here, for the sake of their kids and grandchildren. They understand that there is no one else to do it except us.
As fewer volunteers line up to fight for their country than in the first months of the war, Ukraine is now under pressure to call up more troops. Call sign Canada is a 40-year-old commander in the brigade.
Older troops could be trained to hold defensive positions, but if it's about performing other combat duties, assaulting fields, trenches, returning our land, then of course we need younger boys who are more resilient.
Russia, having seized the initiative after a failed Ukrainian counteroffensive last year, is gradually making inroads that could threaten key cities and roads in the east. This comes as Ukrainian officials say they want a full withdrawal of Russian troops and to regain all their internationally recognized territory, a task many experts say will be difficult as the war grinds on and saps more resources. Aimed at attracting more volunteers, Ukraine's call-up effort, bolstered by government and military PR campaigns, have offered candidates a choice of where and how to serve. 50-year-old Ukrainian soldier Bell had this appeal to compatriots.
I don't judge. No one should be forced to join the army. They should understand that no one other than us and them will do this. This is important. Everyone will have kids and families at some point. They need to be defended now, not whenever you're given a draft notice.
The Nasdaq eked out its fifth straight record closing high on Friday as gains in tech-related stocks help keep the streak alive. The Dow and S&P 500 each fell slightly lower, while the Nasdaq added about 0.1%. Data on Friday included a preliminary reading of the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Index, which was sharply lower than expectations. But lousy consumer sentiment has its silver lining, explains Lorene Gilbert, CEO of Wealthwise Financial Services.
What that's actually good for, though, is markets. Markets moving forward from a consumer being depressed and down and negative, that actually points to a higher stock market looking out 6 months in a year. So while the consumer may be disheartened, when we look at business owners are so positive about what they see moving forward for their businesses. And that is very important when it comes to growth, because so much of our U.S. Depends on small business.
Helping to power the Nasdaq on Friday were shares of Adobe, which jumped 14.5% a day after the company raised its annual revenue forecast on more demand for its artificial intelligence-powered software. NVIDIA shares ended up more than 1.5%, after briefly surpassing Apple as the world's second most valuable company. Both also lifted the S&P 500 technology sector, which rose 0.5% to hit another record high close. On the flip side, the Russell Small Cap Index fell more than 1.5%, adding to recent losses, while the S&P 500 industrial sector was down 1%.
Siamo tutti antifascisti! Siamo tutti antifascisti!